So good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Rick. I am on the board of the CRA organization, and I'm also the president of the Association of Recycling Market Development Zones, and that's why I wanted to make sure I bring this topic to you. It's definitely a market development zone program, or a market development program that we want to make sure that we find a solution for organic material that for compost and mulch that we're developing here in San Diego County. And hope this is one of many conversations we have to find a solution for this material. In this particular case, it will be focused on agriculture, but there's others, as you'll see in our presentation, other markets that should also be addressed in the near future. So we can go to the next slide. So like I said, this is, we got to make sure we grow a healthy market, and we address all the possible end users that we have. We do have, as you'll see in a couple more slides and Mary's slides, expected production of this material that we have to find a home for. And so there's also additional procurement requirements that we all know that the cities and counties have to comply with. So that also affects the market. Do we have enough of this material? Is enough of us cities working on purchasing or procuring and using this material? And getting the material is only one step. Applying the material properly is I would say the larger step, because it involves a lot of staff, it involves a lot of equipment and management. So I would say one of the easier parts are to get this material, but then the actual use properly in parks and green spaces is the more involved part that some of us might not be considering yet. And then of course the greenhouse gas avoidance here of using this material, and also the sequestration capabilities, which again will be addressed in the presentation. Next. So our distinguished panel, sorry Harold, I didn't get your photo, but you're here in person, which is better. I thought about putting a photo of an avocado, but that wouldn't be cool, right? But Mary Matava, owner of Agri-Service and also Corazon facilities up in Oceanside and down in our neck of the woods in Otay Mesa as well. And also, very important, the president of the Farm Bureau, which I thought was really appropriate to invite to this panel to address how are we going to use this material in agriculture. Emily maybe will join us later, but she was going to give us a little perspective of what Miramar is doing, the greenery is doing to help in this, to develop the market. Next. So quick lay of the land of the compost. The source we have for this information is the Compost and Mulch Market Study that the County of San Diego developed right around the end of 2019, I believe, in 2020. So some of this information, it's a few years behind. Little thing called COVID hit, so that kind of got in the way. But also Mary in her presentations in her slides has additional information on that. But as you could see, the current finished product, I guess back for a few years ago, was 160,000 cubic yards of compost. You see a lot more mulch being created, and again, that's part of the study that was developed back in 2019, 2020. But the material disposed in county landfills that is compostable, it's 1.7 million tons. And so the current, there's a quick numbers of the current and potential compost markets, the current estimates of what's being produced. Again, these are estimates from that study. As you can see the numbers up there, I won't read them all off. But those are the current potential markets, current and potential markets for those type of uses. So agriculture, you see there the current and the potential there. You'll see landscaping, which I hope we could have a separate conversation or a separate presentation on what landscapers could do to help us procure this material and use it. And then stormwater is also a small subset, but it's still an important subset on there that is needed. So next one. That's also for mulch there. You see the mulch is actually much larger, but the potential there, again, it's large. If you could see agriculture, tenfold if you look at what the potential is for them to use this material. Next. So again, organics, I'm kind of, preaching to the choir here. Are we wasting a resource? The Institute of Local Reliance gave us this study a few years back as well. It shows, their study showed that almost 50% of what we disposed is in our landfills is or organic and potential, obviously recyclable, compostable So those are numbers that from this organization, that might be a little bit different than California, but these are overall in a nationwide study they had. Next. So now we're going to go on to expert panel here with Mary for information. So thank you.
Pretty fancy stuff up here. Hi, I'm Mary. I'm Mary Matava. I've been in the composting business for the past 27 and a half years. We have processed to date over 2 million tons, and part of the, into compost and mulch, and part of what we're really proud of is that none of our material has ever gone to methane creating ADC. It has all gone into helping promote healthy soils and reducing erosion. Thanks. I really appreciate a crowd that gets that, because I think it's really important. And next slide, please. Part of the reason it's important is that this was a study that was done down at UCSD and showing the methane production locally. And you can see the purple. The deeper the purple, the more concentrated the methane, and the bigger the circle, the more widespread. So I think it's really important that we, and we're all familiar enough with the county to know where those locations are. So I think it's really important that we're thoughtful about climate change and making sure that these materials do not go in the landfill, but are also thoughtful about what's really creating the methane in the landfill. Next slide, please. But where I really got interested in this was before we talked a lot about climate change, even though in environmental chemistry courses I took at UCSD in the early 80s, I know that seems like a few generations ago, but we did have chemistry back then. We talked a lot about climate, not so much climate change, but pollution. And that's where I think we really have to focus, is that climate change, when we talk about it, it's kind of a nebulous sort of term. And what does that really mean? When we talk about pollution, we know that when we dump organics into the landfill, like food waste or ADC, that it is creating methane. And so that is pollution that is really tangible. And I think that if we really focus on how we act as individuals and communities as polluters, then it makes a lot of sense. But before I got really interested in that, my passion is soils. And one of the things that I think is important is to remember that healthy soils support healthy plants. And that doesn't mean that every time you have what we term a healthy soil, and I used to teach soil so I could bore you for a whole semester, is that when we have healthy soils, it doesn't necessarily mean we're never gonna have problems with our plants, but just like when we're healthy and then we're exposed to a disease or heat or cold or whatever, we're much more able to withstand those pressures. And it's the same thing with our plants. And this is really important in agriculture. So next slide, please. So what we have to do is remember that it isn't just about keeping something out of the landfill and moving it around to various places. And Harold's going to talk a little bit about that. But it is about making sure that we take in holistically, what are we trying to accomplish in agriculture? And agriculture takes a bad rap for a lot of stuff, but we all have to eat. And there's gonna be 10 billion people on the face of this earth pretty soon, and we have to figure out how we are going to produce food in a manner that limits pollution as much as possible and provides people with the healthiest food possible. And we take a lot of that for granted. I've been fortunate enough to travel in Africa working on projects and in Central America. And so I have seen that we take a lot for granted here. So we have to take holistically this whole chemical, physical, and biological aspects of our soils and how they relate to farming into consideration. Next slide, please. So we talk a lot about the soil food web, and this is where compost comes in. And compost, when we add it to our soil, where we put mulch on our soil and it breaks down, it provides the organic matter for microorganisms. And one of the things, this does a lot of stuff in our soil, and again, we could spend a semester talking about it, but one of my favorite things is how changing the biology in our soil with the use of our local compost is really important. So you can take clay soils, and this is what we call a true clay soil. Usually I get to pass this around, but this is really difficult to grow crops in. And this is the soil after probably 10 years now of adding organics to it. So you can see it's nice and crumbly. And that's what we're really trying to accomplish. Oh, sure. You can pass my dirt around. You want to take the clay soil so you can see the, okay. Nobody take my clay soil. That was hard to find soil that is that clay. Okay, so this is really important, and that's what our goal is. But this is just one of the things that organic matter does in our soil. Next slide. So these are some of the key elements and kind of the vision that I have. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because I have 3 minutes left. And so, but you know, we want to be thinking, Bob mentioned this earlier, about kind of shifting that paradigm into waste versus what we can really use and what's valuable. Next slide. So we want to make sure that we have markets for each of the feedstock that we bring in. And I think that that's super important. It's one of the things we did is shift this from being a diversion activity into a manufacturing process. And so what are the needs? The needs are going to be different in different communities. We have a lot of orchard crops here in San Diego County. And so we want to develop products that we can specifically use on those orchard crops that target specific goals for that crop and how to grow that crop better. And that's where, you know, that's where being very thoughtful about this process comes in. So, next slide. So here's what I wanted to do is just quickly point out some of the crop values in San Diego County, because we hear a lot, and I hear a lot. Well, farmers are begging for this stuff. Well, yeah, we all know that putting organics improves soils, but we also know that farming's a business. And you can't spend more money than you bring in. And I've never had a business class in my life, but I'm pretty good at math. And I know that you have to make more money than you spend. And so this is an interesting thing to me because you can see what the crop values are per acre. If you can go to the next slide. And those range from $24 for field crops. So that's pasture land like we'd find in the backcountry. And then up to cut flowers, which is the most valuable crop here in San Diego County. Here you can see the number of acres that we have in California, in San Diego County. So we only have 3,000 acres of vegetable crops. We can use about 50 ton per acre, cubic yards per acre on those crops. So there's the use potential and the estimated tons. And same thing with the fruits and nuts. So that would be things like our avocados, our citrus, that sort of thing. We can use mulch on that. And as Manuel pointed out, there's a lot more mulch use. And we should have just like a whole compost class. But there's a lot more mulch use because there's a difference in how much you use per acre using several inches of mulch versus half an inch to an inch of compost. So you can kind of see what the potential is on the use for that. And you're looking at somewhere around 3 million if you covered every avocado orchard and citrus orchard, 3 million cubic yards of mulch. And then the field crops, you could use up to 22 million yards. So obviously there's room to put all of this stuff. Next slide, please. But here's the problem, is that the biggest use that we have for this, which would be on field crops and pasture land, and probably a lot of you have heard about the Marine Compost Project, and it makes a lot of sense. But when you're making $24 per acre, and that's the value of that land, and it's going to cost you somewhere in the neighborhood of $3,000 per acre to buy it, transport it, and spread it, then I think that that's where we need to start focusing our discussions on what makes sense and who's going to pay for that. And do we come up with a producer responsibility model for this, like we do with other recyclables, and say, if you're producing it, then you have to see it to the end of its life, sort of thing. So I would love to start to see that conversation. Next slide. And then also, I think we also have to talk about the transportation, because there's a lot of carbon dioxide that's spread in transportation. And even though somebody might have, inside our cities, we're using low carbon type fuels and natural gas type fuels, or recycled natural gas. So I know we're doing that, but then it goes long distances. And so if you're taking stuff from San Diego and taking it up to LA, there's a carbon footprint associated with that. And I don't think that we're really hearing as much as we should about that. And so what I'd like to do is kind of end this with going back to the basic R's, and reducing is one of the most important things. So I think we really need to find out ways of reducing the amount of yard trimmings and green material and food materials we have, and not even getting them into the system in the first place. And when they do get into the system, let's help build healthy soils. So thank you very much.
Do we just have one more minute to have, just if you could, because my understanding is that we had a little bit more time than the normal. So, Harold, can you go ahead and tell us your experience?
Yes. Okay. Thank you for having me. My name is Harold Stewart. I'm the owner of Stewart's Avocados and CH&H Flower Farms. My farm started using organic mulch to reduce my water usage. On my 27 acres of avocados, I was using about 24 to 30 million gallons of water a year. And I've almost reduced that in half by putting down organic mulch on my grove. And what it does is it, like as Mary says, you're rebuilding the soil. We're taking this granite that the avocados are planted in that isn't a very nutritious soil for the plants themselves, and we're adding this organic matter into the process, which is reducing the water usage, the water cost, and it's also helping with fertilization. And I also use a mulch tea machine to do a foliar spray. So I'm cutting back on any use of pesticides, fungicides through the use of the mulch tea. And it's been a very interesting transformation, because a lot of farmers aren't willing to go straight into putting mulch down. They want to see the instant results. Well, that ends up becoming a double-edged sword, because once you put down the manufactured fertilizers, which also cause a lot of carbon pollution to be produced and transported, what ends up happening is you end up killing all the good microbes in the soil, and you change the biology of the soil, and you pretty much kill the entire topsoil of your crops. So this has been a big investment, a lot of work, and it's been an enjoyable ride, because I'm seeing the benefits of my trees being healthier, and the bottom line of producing the crop for the cost of water. And we know in California there's a water shortage. So, if you can save, 10, 15 million gallons of water a year on one particular grove alone, what can you do if all the farmers are doing this throughout the state, throughout the nation? And that's kind of the importance of why I'm here to speak. And that's what, I wanted to share my, boots on the ground experience with what we're doing, trying to sequester the carbon footprint of farming. So thank you.
Thank you. So we have more time if we want to continue on your presentation, Mary.
Oh, yeah. Sure. I just had a couple more slides, I think. Yeah. As that soil's being passed around, one of the things I really love about putting compost on soil is that the reason that our soil turns dark is because of all those dead microorganisms. So bacteria kind of give their lives. That carbon that we're putting into the soil helps the bacteria survive. They're like us, they need the carbon. And what they do is when they go through their life cycle, they're kind of sticky, and they start to stick those clay particles together. And that's what gives the soil a nice crumbly structure and gives it the pore space that we need for water and air to move through the soil, which is what Harold was saying, helps build this really nice topsoil, and it takes time. And so we can't rush it. That's the most important part of the 5 factors of soil formation is time. And so that necromass is what really gives the soil and compost its nice, rich color. So next slide real quick. So one of the things that we're doing is we're developing products that cities and municipalities can also use for their SB 1383 procurement. We get a lot of questions about it, and so we want to make sure that those products that we produce not only improve soil, but help somebody with their checkbox of being able to wade through the myriad of record keeping. You have a myriad of record keeping, right?
Quite a bit, yeah. Everybody can attest here that there's quite a bit of record keeping, and not only that, like I mentioned earlier, it's not only the cost of the material, but also the cost of spreading it and the labor that it takes to do so. So it's an additional discussion that I'm sure everybody's thinking about, but it's not really has been really considered yet. So.
And that was, the 3 of us had an opportunity a few weeks ago to participate in spreading demonstrations. And I would say that that's one of the frustrations in farming too, is that, you have equipment, it's all specialty equipment. What does it do, Harold?
The equipment,
Breaks down.
the bark blowers, they take the bark in bulk and puts it through an airlock, and you take the hose and pretty much blow it through the groves and everywhere where you need mulch.
Yeah, and there's a frustration with that, because since it is specialty equipment, it's breaking down all the time,
Yeah.
right? So you not only have to be a farmer, investing your time and efforts and money into this, but you have to be a mechanic on the side just to figure out what's going on with it, because it's, if we buy something from Caterpillar, there's 27 different languages that these pages are in, right, that the instructions are in. And if you only speak Swahili, you can understand how to fix something. But with the specialty equipment, every single piece of equipment is different. And I think that that's one of the frustrations, is that you have to really take this into consideration, that we're not, farmers aren't big companies.
Yeah. During the demonstration, Harold, you mentioned how you actually basically equipped your equipment, right, to be able to work properly. You kind of added some additional, parts to it. And
Correct, yeah. I actually went there with the equipment which I purchased, and I was a mechanic by trade years ago, and I just couldn't get it to work. And I went there, humbled myself, and had other farmers help me figure out what was going on, and we got the machine working beautifully. But it's, you're, like Mary was saying, sometimes you're a mechanic first. I have a big, huge lift sitting out in front of my house, and it looks like a mechanic shop, unfortunately, but there's a lot that goes into it.
you're a great example on how using the material and all the time and resources you put to making sure the equipment works,
Yes.
it's still helping your bottom line.
Oh, absolutely,
So-
absolutely. And I mean, we live on the Grove, so, we want to make sure that everything we do is safe and, organic and regenerative farming. And, we're just very particular about what we do. And I personally think it shows in the way of the flavor of the fruit and just in the health of the trees.
So Mary, as far as the Farm Bureau, how do you see that involvement there to make sure we communicate this well with members? And
Well, we try and make sure that we're part of the conversation. We represent 1,200 farmers in the county, which is, I know they say that there's 5,000 farms in San Diego County. We lead the country in small farms in this county. A lot of that are horse ranches and things like that. But as far as the farmers growing crops, we believe that there's somewhere in that neighborhood of 1,200 distinct farms. And we try and get the word out to farmers that these products are available. And the main thing is trying to figure out a way to finance it getting out there. I don't think there's a problem. The other concern with farmers is that they don't want junk on their farm. And contamination is one of the biggest problems that we have. And I think it's been made even more confusing by saying, oh, well, throw all your paper products in here. Because people don't distinguish between a pizza box and an Amazon box. And I think that that's one of the issues that we see. And you know, personally, since I have the microphone, I think we should set programs up for success and not for failure. And I think by saying throw everything into the green bin and somebody will figure it out, we don't know if those are plastic coated, we don't know if they're paper coated. And I think setting it up for success is probably really important, and just saying if you don't eat it or grow it, then we probably don't want it on our farms. And it's really hard to get that message across. It certainly got lost in the question and answer portion of the Cal Recycle website. And you know, people truly think that they need to put all of these things in, but we don't want microplastics in our soil.
So unfortunately, we ran out of time, but this
Wait, I have a question, Manuel.
yeah.
Recently, the county passed an amendment to the planning and zoning ordinance to allow the farmers to take in organics to do composting. Is there any action on this since that happened? What do you know about that, Mary?
We haven't seen any action on it yet, but at Farm Bureau, we really supported this because we have to make ways of making it affordable to farmers. There's things that we need to do in the production end of making sure contaminants keep out of it. But when it comes to the actual farmers using this, I don't think you can meet the goals of organic diversion without saying, yes, this is a manufacturing process and we need to make a product to promote healthy soils. But then it's got to be affordable. So we really need to figure out that affordability piece.
So it sounds like the call to action here, number one I hear is cleaning up the material, making sure we have the pristine, most cleanest material available for the farms to use, and that takes us jurisdictions and programs to make sure we educate properly and make sure we work with our haulers to identify those contaminants and make sure we take the appropriate action and education that we give out to our residents and businesses. And besides, as part of our enforcement that we also need to do as part of this SB 1383 enforcement. But also, we need to make sure we easily monetize this process and make it affordable from product cost to application. And I think that's an ongoing conversation that we'll have. But thank you very much, everybody, for your attention. Thank you very much for your time.